I am a big fan of craftsmanship. I think the world needs more craftsmanship. I'm going to take a bit of a detour here, which I know I'm a big fan of doing. But I remember reading, there's a guy, Paul Rosenberg. He runs a website called Freeman's Perspective. He's not that well known, but he was one of the original cypherpunks. And he has a great book called The Lodging of Wayfaring Men, which is kind of about the original cypherpunk movement, precursor to Bitcoin and all these things. And he had a post once which really resonated with me, and I never really thought about it before. But he said that until about the 19th century, work was a source of pride and meaning for people commonly, and I think his saying was, "Work is the insertion of creativity into the world," which I like a lot. And this was always how people saw work for most of history. And then industrialization happened, and suddenly work is, hey, come and do the same thing on a factory floor for 8 hours a day, and then go home, and we'll buy you with these things for your immiseration. And then over the course of the 20th century, organizations become these monstrous behemoths employing tens of thousands of people, and that was the predominant model of work. And bigger is better, and we add headcount, and and everything's run by an industrial processor. It removes all that creativity and craftsmanship, and everything just. I think with the new information age economy, it's going back to that individual and customized, and and you see with crypto that the average size of organizations is now far smaller than it was in an industrial context, and you're seeing that mirrored across the entire economy. We're going back to a model where self-employment or working in small teams is the norm, versus these huge organizations. I don't think I've ever hired for a company that in crypto that had a headcount over 50. Whereas when I worked in industrial era recruiting, that would be considered a very small company. So going back to this concept of craftsmanship, one of the recruiting has always been a small team business. There are big recruitment companies, but usually it's a boutique thing. And back in the earliest days of recruiting, there were certain factors of craftsmanship around how the job is done that I think many of which have been lost by the internet. For example, if you look at the typical recruiting process, what most people think is they say, "Oh, I tell the recruiter what we need. They go away and they send me some resumes, and then we hire someone, and that's it." It's kind of a simplistic view, but that's what a lot of people think recruiting is. And I think that's what a lot of recruiters more or less think recruiting is now. Hey, we have this. Let's send out some LinkedIn messages and see what happens. But the reality is, back when recruiting was fundamentally a phone business, and our entire job was to make various types of phone calls, there was an elaborate art form and craftsmanship behind each of those steps in the process and types of call. There's an art form to the recruiting call. There's an art form to the job order intake. And there's so many other things beyond that. Like, for example, there's a specific art form and process to the candidate interview prep, to the client interview prep, to make sure that both sides of the process goes well. There was an art form to conducting a candidate debrief, to a client debrief. There was an art form to asking for referrals. This would seem alien to so many people that have started recruiting in the internet age, but we used to have entire training courses on how to effectively solicit candidate referrals. So once we approach a candidate and maybe they're not interested in the job, okay, well, instead of just, okay, we're going to leave now, see you later, thanks. Well, if they're good at what they do, they'll know multiple other people who are good at what they do. So there was an art and science to asking that person to refer the right people to speak to. And I'm getting into the rabbit hole a little bit here on the details. What most people will do, if they even ask for referrals, say, okay, who do you know, or do you have any friends looking for work, or and even if you just say, hey, who do you know that could do this job? Most people will immediately think of, hey, who do I know that's looking for work? Well, I don't know anyone that's looking for work, so no, I can't refer you to anyone. But but that's not what we want. We want to know who those people are, not if they're not looking for work or not. That's our job to figure out appropriately. So if you reframe and rephrase and follow up with the question in certain ways, there was an optimized way to get someone to say, okay, yeah, I understand that. Here are the 2 or 3 or 4 people that I could recommend, regardless of whether they're looking for work. And there's an art form that takes considerable practice to be able to do that consistently. And that is just one example of many of craftsmanship. I think so much of that craftsmanship has been lost because people now, they blanket with emails and LinkedIn messages, they have calls, and we just let the chips fall where they may. But if you look at the craftsmanship that's involved in optimizing every step of the process for the results. So just consider, for example, what if you, for every potential candidate that you speak to, you raise your rate of getting referrals from 5% to 55%? What are the implications for that on the outcomes of the process and the ratios for success? Imagine those sort of improvements applied at every little step. And I think it's the difference between the artisan craftsman way of doing something and the body shop industrial machinery way.